Jim White had a lot to say for himself yesterday, didn't he? He was on Talk Sport. He was talking to Simon Jordan. To be fair, there was a lot to talk about on Talk Sport yesterday. What with Manchester City, they're going on a naughty step, basically, Manchester City, aren't they? So, but what he did say was that Declan Rice was available, we know this, in the summer, next summer, for £120 million. However, was plus extras. And apparently we turned down a £100 million bid from Manchester United last summer for him. Didn't know that. Got to be honest, I didn't know that. So anyway, thank you to everybody who got involved, and I did that little snippet video yesterday. I asked you to leave your comments. We're going to look through them in just a bit. I am joined by Michael, who will be very familiar to those of you, well, basically our Hammers Chat patrons, but it'd also be, you might think, hold on a second, I'm not a Hammers Chat patron, but I recognise him. Well, maybe you've seen one of his get Voice of an Angel. He's a very, very good singer. But where you may recognise him from was our transfer deadline day show where he joined up with Ray and Charlie, didn't he? On the Two Spammers, One Hammer. He's here to talk about Declan Rice and that bid. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, very well. Thank you for having me. So it's all fun and games with Rice. Like you said yesterday, lot to say, Jim White, on TalkSport, and we sort of know where that's come from, don't we? That's the interesting thing whenever you hear it from Jim White's voice, you know. I guess they're putting the bait out there and fishing for bites. I think it's been said before now on the channel by yourself and by Gio. I think they're looking to sort of drive some sort of bidding war and try and drive up the price. But the thing about that is the counter approach to that is I could see these other clubs, they're starting to throw other names up like that Casado, and that, like obviously Chelsea picking up Enzo Fernandez. They're going to sort of try and play around it. So it's a little bit of a game of cat and mouse at the moment. Really, really interesting. Yeah,
it is. Yes, Chelsea have splashed the cash. And I think the instant thing is to think, well, because they splashed the cash, Chelsea, and the guy actually their new signing turned around and said he based his game on Declan Rice. He'd looked at Declan Rice to see how he could develop and how he could adapt to the Premier League. So it's easy to look at that and think, well, they're just not going to be interested. They're not going to be in to buy him. I'll look at Arsenal. The thing is, just to go back to Chelsea, that's a dangerous assumption because they're spending money like it's going out of fashion. So maybe, just maybe, they want him as well. Of course, Arsenal signed Jorginho, but that's no long-term solution. That's just, you got the feeling that's a signing to get them over the line for this season so as they can beat Man City. Manchester United, I just think they spent so long chasing Frankie de Jong, didn't get him. And now I think pretty much Barcelona have got that La Liga sewn up now. Well, you know, you're based over in Spanish waters yourself, my friend. But also I look at it and I think Frankie de Jong is established now in that Barcelona team. He's enjoying life. He's playing all the time. I think it's Luis Enrique, the manager there. I think it might be.
I think so. To be honest, I don't really follow the Spanish league that much, despite being out here. But you've mentioned several times about de Jong not wanting to relocate, despite what money they throw at him. So it's another one of those political games, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. And I think if they don't get him, then maybe Declan Rice is an option as well. So I do think the bidding war, I think it's something that the club want. I do often think, you know, as you'll know, I think sometimes you just got to be a little bit brave. And if you, because I don't think he's worth 100. Well, I don't think he's worth. I don't think we'll get 100. But do you think we'll get 120 million for him?
Again, it's another point. It's not about what he's worth. It's about what he's worth to us. And there's a massive game of cat and mouse going on. Going back through those clubs there, like we said, Arsenal are now have got Jorginho, but that's a short-term sort of plug the gap signing. But they also were looking at that Casado. Is it pronounced?
Something like that. Yeah.
I don't see the need. I don't feel like City need him with Rodri. Manchester United have now got that Casemiro. So they're sort of throwing this we don't need you thing out. And that's exactly why I think this is now the time that Sullivan's had a word with his mate, old Jim. And Jim White's, you know, putting the bait out there to see what they get. To answer your question, I can't see us getting as much as 120 million. I think it's going to be a game of chicken as well, depending how long we leave it, because every day the clock's ticking down on obviously his contract elapsing and less time. So I'm not sure. I think we'll end up with around 80 is what I think. And then it's just going to have to be a case of getting the appropriate replacements, which I don't know if fills us with dread or not.
Well, I don't know who would even begin to choose the appropriate replacement. I think that's the problem at the moment. I do think the long-term target was Anana. I think Anana was meant to bed in this season, then eventually take over from Declan. I just want to go through a couple of comments. So Ionix says, "Can we have a Chammers Chat whip round? Obviously to buy Declan Rice and keep him here." Samuel says 100 million was a good starting offer last year. Personally, I'd say 90 million this summer is about right. Unfortunately, so that plays into what you think, and I do as well. I do think there's an element of propaganda about this because it's come from Jim White. 120 million, you can forget it. I do think it's going to be south of 100 million. Liam Hennessy says Chelsea should have some bargains available then. Who do you see as replacements? I mean, funny enough, Liam, I think, and this goes into what I was just saying to Michael there, I think it's Flynn Downs. I would really like to see Flynn Downs being the replacement. Now, we'll get back to a couple more questions in a minute. I'll just go to Michael again. I don't mean we just have Flynn Downs, we don't buy anyone. What I mean is you do buy somebody as well, but it's hard to say Flynn Downs be as good as Declan Rice, but he looks a really, really good player.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Flynn, mate?
I agree. Sadly, we haven't really seen enough of him, but maybe it's tactical again. Maybe it's Moyes keeping him sort of under wraps a little bit and just letting him learn from Declan in Declan's last time. Last 6 months there, maybe he's just sort of his understudy, and maybe he's just bringing him through. I feel like he needs to be in the second half of the season given a few more games, but Moyes is a stubborn man, and I don't know if I can see a massive change in ethos in the next 6 months. I mean, another thing that weakens our negotiating position when we're talking, coming back to the price for a moment, is the fact that all and sundry know that Rice wants to go. If it was a case of we've got this great asset and then a bidding war commences and then everybody's coming in for it, then you can hold firm for your price and you can stay with your bidding war. Not much good when he's let everybody know that he's keen to get out the door. So I feel like we're going to be undercut and get nowhere near the price we need. I feel like developing Downs and trusting Downs will be one thing, and maybe adding another. Maybe another one or two in that. To be honest, we're going to need 2 men to replace Declan Rice, aren't we?
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree, and I just think we can't let ourselves be driven too much by everybody else. At some point, we got to be brave enough to turn. Don't get me wrong, we couldn't get to do this if we were relegated, but at some point, we've got to be brave enough to put our foot down and say, well, actually, no, if we're getting that money, we'll keep him for another year, and not be afraid of it, because I know people have said, well, maybe he'll walk away on a free. Well, that's another 2 years. Again, you keep a player of that quality, you've only got to look at how well he played against Newcastle. Get a player of that quality for another 2 years. I mean, you've kept a hell of a player. I don't think he will. I don't think he would want to. I think at some point you've got to play a little bit hardball and just say to everybody else, well, you know what? What we do, he's not going to, in a year's time, with a year left on his contract, it's not like we're getting 10 million. People then have a real bidding war. Actually, you just look and think, well, you know what? If you're going to offer us 70 now, we'll keep him for another year and take 50 in 12 months' time. Did you see him in against Newcastle?
I didn't. I was working Saturday afternoon, so I didn't. I normally watch every game, but I came and watched the highlights and stuff and watched it. But from listening to your player ratings on Patreon, really sound like he was on form and on point.
He was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant. Well, you've heard the player ratings. Gio gave him a 10 out of 10, and when he did, it's not like I said, oh, no, surely not a 10 out of 10. It would, I gave him a 9. Gio gave him a 10. He was absolutely outstanding in there, and I think he was so good that Newcastle possibly look at that and think, oh, you know what? But here's what's interesting, and here's what I think why it plays into it. Not a blinding move by Sullivan, but I do understand why he's done it. Good, because Newcastle seems to have this policy: we won't overpay. We'll only play what a player's worth. Well, that's all well and good. You can do that if you've got a clear run at the player. So I believe they did it with Botman. And they said, well, actually, we're not playing that now. We'll go back in. But Botman was very much saying, well, that's the only club I want to go to. And nobody else was getting anywhere near Newcastle's money. So they had a clear run at him. So you can do that. I think if you've got a player like Declan Rice, and you've got, let's say, Man United have bid 75 million, Arsenal have bid 80 million. It's hard to say what Man City are doing, but, whatever. Chelsea have bid, whatever, 89 million or something like that. Newcastle can't have that policy anymore. Newcastle can't turn around and say, "Well, do you know what? We're only paying 60 million and not a penny more." No, you're going to have to get involved in that. He was so good, Michael. Honestly, he was. I wouldn't be surprised, and Eddie Howe had a lot of nice things to say about him. Would not be surprised at all if it's like a rich boys play thing. If Newcastle say, "Oh, we got to have one of them."
Do you think he was putting himself? Do you think he was putting himself in the shop window, or do you think he was just Declan Rice being Declan Rice?
Well, both. I think he was Declan Rice being Declan Rice, but it does not hurt him at all. I'm not sure how much he's got to go and live in the northeast, and I don't mean that to be detrimental to the northeast. Far from it. My nan was a Geordie, but I used to get dunked in the bloody North Sea when I was a kid on my summer holidays. Right, so let's just get that right. But I do think it doesn't harm him. When I say that about Newcastle, I just say he has just bought a new house in Cobham, and he's just had it's just out. I can't remember, but whatever. He's just become a father relatively recently. I don't think there's a massive desire to move up there. So sorry, what were you going to say, mate?
From our point of view, I think we need to remember it's a business decision as well. I think all of us fans get swept up in emotion. I think we need to really take the emotion out of it. I mean, if you're looking at this, for example, my dad used to be a builder and then eventually a property developer. And the way, just as an analogy, the way he used to take houses is you see it as boxes and assets. And you do everything magnolia, and you don't start going in the house and thinking, well, I'd like this, and I'd like this kitchen. You treat it as a box. You go in, you decorate it, everything as a plain canvas, and you move it on and you sell boxes. We've had some great times with Declan Rice. It's been great that he's come through the academy. But let's, at this point, take the emotion out of it and the sentiment out of it and understand what he is as an asset. If he's going to go, he's dead set on going. I don't think there's anything any set of circumstances going to allow us to keep him. We, in return, have got to do the same tactical thing as Sullivan's doing in fishing the bay out of there, as the other clubs are doing by mentioning alternative for those positions, in that we have got to do the same thing.
Yeah.
We've got to have a good plan for his replacement, even if it's Downs or it's 2 or 3 other options, and we need to maximise exactly how much we can get out of him. It's got to be a business decision, and we've got to take the emotion out of it.
Yeah, well, it'll be very interesting to see what happens. I'm just going to go through a couple more comments. Adam says, I would give him to Man U or Arsenal, just keep Chelsea out of it. He'd obviously love to keep him. And Paul McCarthy said, no chance, 80, 90 million. And he's a goner. I was basically saying no chance, 120 million. He said, how much... sorry, this is Matt. He said, how much would you want Declan this summer? How much would you be prepared to lose in the transfer fee? Hopefully I just covered that question for you, Matt. Certainly, if someone comes around 50 odd million, even 70 million, I might be tempted to say, do you know what, we'll keep him for another season. Don't think it would make Declan happy, but he's a professional. I think he'd deal with it.
And there's this argument, Gonzo, that we've got him for free, but we haven't. We've invested a lot of time and a lot of money into him, haven't we? Don't forget, we took a chance on, and he's been great for us, but we took a chance on this gangly kid that hadn't had his growth spurt and developed into his frame, that had been released by Chelsea. He's had a lot of coaching. He's had a lot, and it speaks to another point, just coming off the subject a minute. It speaks to just how important those years for development are. He's one that's been given the right mix of the great top-class coaching and the game time. So, I know we're straying off the point a little bit, but you were talking earlier in the week about the likes of Ashby and people's argument that, but name a player that's come back to haunt us. But those years are crucial for their development. So who knows how many Declan Rices that we just left sitting in the development squad without the right mix of game time and coaching and exposure. And so, let's not forget, although we did get him for free, we need to be compensated for the faith we showed him and the amount of years of developing him as we have.
Absolutely. And it's not just, you talk about haunting, it's not just about someone being absolutely world class. If you want a few of those, well, I'll give you your Tony Adams leaving the academy, I'll give you Ray Houghton. I'll tell you what, Declan Rice he's paid back for John Terry, who basically at the same age, which is 14, went from us and went to Chelsea. But it's actually the ones that would have been squad players. It's people like Ben Johnson. So actually it's people like Liam Ridgewell It's people I was saying Courtney House at Aston Villa. It's people who go and have a really good career like Junior Stanislas, who would have been a really good, effective squad player for us, for years. There are Leon Britton was a superb player. For Swansea, played really, really well. At one point, did he not have the best passing stats in the whole Premier League? We let him go as well. So it's actually, there's a lot of players like that who might, just because they're not £100 million player, there's still, you still can produce players. So I think there's you're absolutely right. And somebody actually made this point about and I think it was a good point, where with the academy, that the academy can't be deemed to be a failure. And even if we are losing a little bit of money from time to time, actually, we've got £18 million for Grady D and Garner. We might get £100 million for Declan Rice. Actually, in terms of the budgetary requirements of the academy, the academy's doing just fine in that sense. So and I guess that's a really, really good point. I think it's just we stray a little bit, but it is more to do with the chances, maybe, and I think that's the thing. Declan Rice got his chance, and that was important. But I'm not sure it would have necessarily happened that way under Moyes. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. But when he was first here, David Moyes was very much saying, "Oh, I like my centre backs to have more experience." Of course, Moyes left. Pellegrini walked in and said he's not a defender, he's a midfielder. Then when Moyes came back, he had a player who had 50 appearances under his belt. So okay, I'll use him now. We'll just go through the last few questions. I do appreciate you sending them, particularly when I do this post. You might have seen a little short post that we're doing. We're just trying something different at the moment. So thank you very much for getting engaged. Paul said, if there's a busy more, I don't think Man City will be in a mix. Obviously, talking about Man City on a naughty step. Mr. Collingwood said he'll maintain his performances against Newcastle to get us that price. He'll need to maintain his performances. That's absolutely right. If he plays as well as he did against Newcastle, and this is why I think these comments are off the back of that. He was so good. I think it was Sullivan reminding everyone, "Oi, this is £120 million player."
It's good timing. It's good timing.
It is. Peter thinks we should have a whip round as well. Phil thinks it means we're getting McTominay as a replacement. Theme parks and coasters, which is an interesting name for a channel, says Declan still may want to stay until next summer. If we win the Conference League, I've got to say, I think we'd have to have a massive takeover with a lot of investment, and I don't think you can do that now. Look at Man City. Acid Joke says, I think Declan's departure in the summer is still uncertain. So he thinks so as well, which is really, really interesting. James says, I don't think he'll be leaving. Can't see anyone paying 120 million. That's James Gunn. And a GP who's got a very nice zippy as his avatar, says 95 mil and 70 million euros on Casemiro and Anthony this season. 100 million isn't that much. I think what he's saying is Manchester United have shown that they absolutely can afford to pay 100 million for Declan Rice. Just before I let you go, mate, we will get you on again. Thank you for joining us. How are you feeling after the last 2 or 3 results? Feeling a little bit better?
Do I have a renewed optimism. I was at the end of my tether, I think, like a lot of us, because we hadn't really seen any change. Feeling a little bit better about it. You could talk about the level of opposition in the main, Newcastle aside. But he does, you talked about it. He does seem to still have the dressing room. If it was looking like all heads had gone and we were just sort of freewheeling towards relegation, I'd be worried. Actually, there's still a little bit of fighting there, isn't there? They're still fighting for each other or for the fans or maybe for Moyes. I've got a renewed optimism. I think we'll get a result against Chelsea. I think we'll raise our game against Spurs. I think we'll beat Forest. And I think things will start looking a bit rosier next month. I really do. I hope so. That could all change by next week. Such as being a West Ham fan.
That's it, mate. It is a roller coaster, like the channel, there. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us, Michael. Cheers, mate. Really appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
No, you're very welcome, mate. I'll be back with more West Ham related nonsense tomorrow.